Hi, this is Dana, and on this channel I speak about spiritual warfare. In this video, God has guided me, I think mostly Jesus guided me, in fact, to talk about a few more like I would say technical issues from spiritual fighting. Yeah, so not so much philosophical matters, but technical issues. And I imagine this is useful to some individuals who are going through spiritual fighting themselves. These are some of them are my personal choices, some of them were divinely guided to me, and I would have never chosen that way, but God has shown to me the benefits of it. For example, when there is sometimes God in spiritual fighting, you have to go through certain phases. So you have to break a bondage. And there are two issues here that I will mention. One of them is that in breaking the bondage, let's say, for example, that in a previous lifetime, there was a bondage created, I don't know, somebody murdered somebody else. And there are a number of actions taken against that individual. There are a number of occult practices created against that individual. Now, you have the overall bondage of the murder, then you have more technical steps in order to build up that overarching bondage. And that can mean harassment, that can mean thieves that stole things from that individual, that can mean slander that was said about that individual. A lot of smaller steps of aggression, gang stalking, and harassment, but each of them individually is a bondage in itself. So you have the overall bondage of the murder, of the situation, and who was haunting that individual, but equally, all those intermediary steps which and attacks which were created against that individual, each of them in itself, it's a bondage. Now, when you want to end for good that all that was involved in that bondage, you have to break each and every single one of them. This is really frustrating. I must tell you, I I get very frustrated with it many times, because to me it's like, okay, are we done with this already? And God shows me, He says, you are done. You showed that this one murdered the other one, but there are 15 more steps that you need to take until you're ending the situational karmic cycle. Namely, you have to break each and every single thing that they created against that individual until they succeeded to kill him. Because if you don't, the murder will not happen, but all of those 15 steps will be repeated. Meaning, you're going to encounter the slander, you're going to encounter the losing the job, you're going to encounter losing the money, thief stealing your money, you're going to encounter parts of that bondage which you didn't break. So you have the overall bondage, and then you have intermediary steps taken in order to bring into existence the overall outcome of the bondage. And you have to break each and every single one of them, because if you don't, that is gonna repeat. Each and every single one of them is an energy created, and each and every single one of them has to be rolled back, and karma has to be delivered, and the cycle must end. That's why you talk about situational karmic cycle. When you have a situational karmic cycle ending, that means you ended everything related to that bondage, not just the bondage itself. You see, I hope I'm making myself clear. If you talk about a marriage which was created as a bondage, you have the getting married, the marriage in itself, but then you have all that happened between that man and that woman. Maybe slander, maybe cheating, maybe hitting her, maybe, I don't know, stealing from her. And all of those in itself are individual bondages. You have to break the overall bondage of the marriage, but you have to also break all of the others, intermediary steps which were involved in that marriage, okay, or were created through that marriage. So I hope by these two examples I made this message very clear. So when you do bondage breaking, it takes much longer than would be expected, and even if you already prove and you broke the overall bondage, you still spend a lot of time in rolling back the forces which were involved in the final outcome, because many of these, you have to remember, particularly if it's something created in a previous lifetime, you have to understand that many of these developed throughout an entire lifetime. Somebody from your lineage embodied, incarnated, and it took an entire lifetime for that bondage to actually come into being and achieve outcome. So you have to break every single bondage which was involved, which God decides that is relevant enough. If you don't, you will encounter it. It will repeat itself. It's a karmic cycle which repeats itself, okay? So this is one thing, namely that when you do bondage breaking, it's not just the overall outcome that you break. That is the one thing. But also you break all of the intermediary steps. They did, for example, they did on you, in order to kill someone, they did black magic, voodoo, sorcery, a lot of attacks, of gang stalking, of harassing us. All of those you have to roll back and close. All of them, individually. Maybe there involved 20 people. You have to do this overall, but also with each individual, one by one. So you have to break everything in order to make sure whatever you don't break, it will repeat itself. So you have to remember this. This is, again, I say, for me, it's very frustrating. And many times I'm just fed up with it because it just takes a very long time. But then again, this is the process. This is how it works. These are the rules of the universe, of the astral. These are energies, forces, and you end the process and the situational karmic cycle only when you finish with everyone involved and all the forces which were actually summoned, conjured, and tasked to do whatever they did. So this is one message. Another message is that many times during the spiritual fighting, of course, you encounter different types of attacks. Most times, they will create blockages, energetic blockages, and under this blockage, so it's a blockage that so you cannot see, and under that blockage, that is usually a white energy. It's not a light, but it's a white energy. And underneath that energy, there is a lot of attacks going on. It's just that the blockage has the purpose to block you, obviously. So you cannot detect all of that is happening underneath. And underneath that, they would carry on attacks on different chakras, all of the other attacks that I have been mentioning throughout time, and many others. And the disadvantage in such a situation is that you don't see it in order to fight it immediately, and that drains your energy, obviously. And most probably when this happens, it means that they have a purpose why they don't want you to have energy awareness at that particular time. That means it's an important moment. It's something that they want to achieve with that. They want to preclude you from seeing something. They want to divert you from your path and convince you to say something or to accept something or to give or receive something. So they usually have a purpose in doing this. So it is important that you notice when this is done, when this happens, and try to break off somehow from this. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's impossible to break off. Now, everybody can have different ways of doing this. Now, I will share my way. This is actually, Jesus asked me to share this. Maybe this is useful to someone, but I'm not sure that this is necessarily the proper way. Usually, when I do this, usually God is not so enthusiastic about me doing this. But my style, my way of dealing with it is that when it becomes unbearable, because if you do have energy awareness, this kind of blockage is really painful. It's really painful, and it blocks your entire awareness, you know. So it's really disturbing. Let's say it's disturbing in many ways. In many ways. Usually, what I do, I escalate the situation. Like I will create a situation where the so let me explain this. This is not rolling back the energy. This is a decision which you must understand very well how it functions. Don't take my example for granted. Just make sure that it's something that you are willing to actually do. It doesn't roll back the attack. It doesn't diminish the attack. Quite the opposite. It escalates the attack. Right? And there are many ways in which you can do this. I'll give you an example. I was in an airport in another country when I was in the spiritual journey, and there was this type of attack on me, and I detected who was sending the attack, and I usually and many times, not just then, I would just go sit next to the person who is doing the attack. Jesus comes with me and he supports me in this, because usually basically my logic is very simple, and I tell him, it's like it's too much, I can't take this anymore, just it's too much. Okay, so now I'm like, okay, let's call it a quits. I'm coming to you, look into my eyes, let's see, the two of us, can you stay in the same type of energy that you have been sending to me? Now usually God doesn't agree with this. This is like usually like the Americans have that game which teenagers play, the chicken thing, where the two cars are driving towards each other, facing each other, to see which one is chickens out first. This is my way of dealing with it. I don't do this lightly. I do this when it's really bad and really I cannot take the pain and the pressure of the energy anymore, and that basically just can't. So I'm like, and I always say to Jesus, I cannot take this anymore. Tell me who's doing it. Take me there. And I find ways to escalate. Sometimes I'll give you an example. When this kind of attacks are carried out and you're indoors and you have the opportunity, you can plug in a lot of electrical items. Electricity increases the power of the energy in the room, the use of electricity at the time. So I would just turn on specific electrical objects in my house in order to escalate the energy attack. Now, I'm not controlling the attack. The attack is sent at me. But the point is, I'm escalating the energy. Now, the energy attack, this is painful. It's more painful than during the attack itself. But the advantage of doing this is that it becomes so painful that it becomes obvious. So you start seeing things. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. Escalating the attack can have many benefits. One of them is that most times it becomes so painful that it becomes obvious to you who's attacking, what type of attack is doing, or at least you start seeing what is being done under the blockage. It doesn't take out the blockage. I want to emphasize. It doesn't take out anything. Escalating the attack is basically exactly what the dictionary describes to be escalation. So it becomes even more painful. But as the blockage attack becomes more painful, I get to see what is being done underneath it. Okay, so you get to heal something, maybe not the blockage, because usually that is being done with technology and other type of attack from Scientology, but you can at least try to heal what is being the type of darkness which is being sent under this blockage. Or if you have the opportunity, like I gave you that example, that was not the only one example. I did this before. I had a situation in which an attack was done on my house, whereby spirit attachment was created. spirit mark magic, basically sending huge number of spirits attachments on each and every single item, on the books, on the clothes, on the kitchen items, on everything, including on my fingerprint. And basically, it was impossible to stay. You couldn't breathe, you couldn't do anything. So I decided at some point, I found out who does it. And I took because the spirits were tasked to feed on my energy. So anything that had my energy in my house was a food for them. And of course, in my house, everything has my energy. Anyhow, I found out who was doing it. Not everyone, but I found out a few people, and I took cigarette butts. I took cigarette butts from my own garbage, because cigarette butts carry your fingerprint, you know. So I took cigarette butts. So I went to that person's neighborhood, and I spilled cigarette butts around his house, for example. And I was like, let's see if you can take this, and if you if such an attack is on you, then if you go and you sit in the proximity of that individual, then he will feel it as well. This is why I told you, in that airport, I found out who was doing it. It was security from a specific airline, and I went, I sat next to him. He couldn't, and he was a security guy, and he couldn't stand it. He requested the local police, airport police, to come and to remove me from there. But I didn't say anything to him. I just sat down and I looked at him. That's all. I didn't do anything. And you imagine, he was a security guy, so you can imagine, you cannot actually be confrontational with him, because he's gonna hit you. What do you mean? So I didn't do anything, but he just couldn't bear the type of energy which he himself sent otherwise, now this is you don't use this often, and if you do this, you must, first of all, you must make sure that you want to bear this, because it's painful, but it's a way to snap out of that blockage. Because if you, that's my logic, and this is how I deal with it. I'm not going to stay in a blockage just because they send the blockage. Now, usually God advises against this, because God says, I don't want you to escalate it. I want you to withstand what they're sending, because I want you to consolidate your endurance, and to work with your endurance and your power to withstand this. And sometimes I do imagine that I listen to God when he says this, but at some point I just say, fuck it, I'm just going. I cannot take this anymore. This is enough. And the second advice, if you decide to do this, is always take a spiritual team with you. I never do this, and I actually said in other videos, I never do anything without asking Jesus. I might do sometimes things that God doesn't advise or doesn't agree with, but at all times, with no exception, I always take Jesus with me. I always ask Jesus if he comes with me, if I will be okay afterward, if I can do this. But many times that's also an explanation, and even Jesus says that he's always going to understand me better. First of all, because he's my spiritual guardian, and second of all, he's been in human incarnation, so he knows what it means, the limits of the human incarnation. So whoever is in your spiritual team, whoever you work with, make sure that you check on this. There were circumstances in which Jesus had said no when I wanted to escalate the attack in one way or another, and Jesus said, no, don't now, and I will find a different way for you to get out of the blockage, and he will advise on something else. But this is something that I do. This is my choice. I don't necessarily recommend it to everyone, because I don't want to feel guilty for anyone getting into who knows, bad things. But for me, it worked, and I never exaggerated in using it. I only use it when I honestly believe I cannot take that anymore, or it's draining me too much, and I get too much frustration in dealing with that, and so on. Anyhow, I explained it. Then, if you like it, you can use it. If you don't, God will be more happy if you go His way and you just exercise endurance and so on. Okay. Another thing that God has guided me to talk about also is, for example, there are this kind of attacks of hypnosis, and done with either with white energy, or even with this type of Scientology type of metal element. How did I say that? Metal. Uh, yeah, I don't remember that word. Liquid metal. Yes, liquid metal. So, and there are specific type of attacks which aim to induce a hypnotic status, where basically you can actually feel that your brain doesn't function. You cannot think in the same pace as you would usually do, because it's because of the energy attack, right? And God actually asked me to talk about this, and God showed me that many people need to understand this. There are a number of things which nobody would think of that can help in this situation, and I learned all of them from God, honestly, during attacks at me. One of them is that, for example, you can hide in darkness. So you can hide in darkness. I don't know how to explain. God is always advising this, which I don't necessarily like, but this is how you can hide in darkness, so your light cannot be seen. So the attack won't target you directly. So the attack doesn't actually, is not directed specifically on your light, but somewhere around. Or you can hide in darkness. I will explain. If you are in the proximity of something dark in terms of energy, basically it counterbalances the white light, which is very intense in this type of, in hypnotic type of attacks. Is very intense, and what you need to balance that, so for example, in my spiritual journey, specifically in Germany, I was in Munich, and God has guided me at a specific time when this type of attack started, of hypnosis. God has guided me to go in a specific area, which was really dangerous. It really looked dangerous. I was really scared. I was with the luggage and with my dog, Lucky, and I was like, "Oh my God, what am I doing all on my own on the street?" It was night already, because it was also the festival, the beer festival in Munich. All people were drunk and crazy on the streets, and I was with the luggage and with my dog. And God said, you need to go to that and stay in that neighborhood immediately. And I didn't understand exactly why. God had explained to me, and that was, I think, the first time when I actually consciously started to understand this. God said, there's a lot of darkness in that neighborhood because of what people are doing, because of the level of energy the people have, the type of energy the people have. Probably, I don't know what was happening in that area, but probably also murders. Probably people were very depressed as well, very poor as well. Who knows what was going on in that area? And God showed me this is balancing out the type of attack which is sent to you. It's sent to you a type of hypnosis which essentially it was directed on soul and heart chakra. Yeah, and this can lead to a heart attack in your sleep, as you sleep. And for this purpose, I need you to be in very close proximity to darkness, because this balances out the type of attack which is sent to you. Now, there are different ways in which you can find darkness. One is to be in the proximity, either in a neighborhood or in the proximity of individuals or buildings or locations which carry darkness. Darkness, for example, if we talk in figures, you can talk about Satan and Lucifer. So if Luciferian energy is being sent to you, you need satanic presence in your area. It really sounds crazy, but this is true. This is true. And I'll give you an example. There was one time this kind of attack with white energy, with hypnosis at me, and I was feeling so sick I couldn't breathe. I'm telling you, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't stay awake. I was walking and I was falling asleep as I was walking in the house. It was so strong. I cannot explain to you. And at that particular time, as this was happening in my house, this doppelganger next door, this woman, the doppelganger who's copying me and stealing my intellectual property, stealing my identity, sending a lot of death spells and a lot of attacks, slandering my name and so on, she returned from the city and she entered her house, which, as I explained, is next door, and we're sharing a wall, unfortunately for me. But at that particular time, she was carrying such dark energy, satanic energy, because she's playing satanic music, doing satanic rituals and all sorts of things. I can hear them through the wall. And but at that particular time, actually it balanced out the white energy attack which was sent to me. And God showed me. He said, you see, darkness, you see, the darkness, once she came in her house, actually I could feel the darkness, which instantly balanced the type of attack. So it decreased the intensity of the hypnosis attack instantly. It doesn't eliminate it, but they balance each other somehow. And the intensity of the attack is not that painful to you anymore. So this is an example. So you either find the person who's satanic and you spend some time in the same area just in order to balance the energy. Don't talk to them because they're dangerous. But just, I'm telling you, or some location or something. So you find a way to find darkness in this way. Or you can go in dumpster, garbage area, where basically automatically, because of the garbage is dark energy, is dirt. Also another thing which is very important, and it hasn't been discussed enough in spirituality and spiritual fighting, it is important that you preserve, first of all, that you have you're covered, your skin is not exposed, because energy touches your skin and it affects you. You must know that as much as people recommend spiritual baths, and they are helpful obviously to release darkness and so on and so forth, but at the same time, when you are confronted with this kind of attacks of hypnosis, it's important you do not do spiritual baths, because you have to preserve. I don't even know how to explain it in English exactly. You have to preserve the natural oils of your body, which is like for the dogs, you know, that it's not recommended that you wash them very often, because that natural oil on his skin is protecting him from different viruses. It's important for the dog's immunity. For example, my veterinary, I remember that kept telling me when Lucky was small, you only wash him once in a few months. If you need and he gets dirty, you only use water. You don't really wash with shampoo every time, because this is extremely important for the health of the dog, and for the preserving the immunity and so on. It's the same with humans, especially in spiritual fighting, because the idea is that you protect and you create a barrier of energy. That oil is a protective layer between your skin and the energy surrounding you. So this is very important, basically, if you want to put it this way, plain dirt is is protecting you in these cases. So it's you must receive guidance. As always, I always recommend this. I'm sharing knowledge which I am guided to share. Okay, this is not a personal diagnosis or recommendation to anyone. So I don't even know who's listening to my videos, and I'm not even checking up because that's not my thing. I do God's work and spread the word of God. So I am and I am confident that God will make sure that whoever needs to hear this will hear it. Okay, but I always recommend, please check yourself the information that I'm providing, the knowledge that I'm providing to you with your own spiritual team. Ask, I heard this, is it true? Does this apply to me? You should ask this as well. Does this apply to me? Can I use it now? Should I preserve this information for a later stage of the fight, or so on and so forth? Yeah. So check on this. But at this point in time, God has guided me to talk about this. This is really important. This is information which I have been using already for years now in my spiritual fighting. There are many different ways in which you can use this information. I'll give you an example. My next door neighbors, both of them, left and right, are sending to my courtyard a lot of darkness. So at some point, I kept cleaning up my courtyard and so on. And at some point, and they kept sending, and it was sort of like a tit for tat continuous thing. And at some point, God said, you don't go in the back courtyard anymore, because they have done certain rituals and things there which are detrimental to you. So you don't allow the dogs to go there, you don't go yourself there. So I haven't been in my back courtyard for almost a year now. For this reason, because God is very adamant. I asked many times, because the Lucky would like to go there, of course. But I asked many times, and God insistently said, no, you don't. You stay here. And it's clear to me that there were specific type of rituals done, not only because God showed me, but I also feel the energy that comes from that area, you know. When I go myself and clean up, I clean the energy which they send. Now, of course, because God didn't allow me to go, it's been building up, that dark energy which they kept sending. And God has shown to me, for example, recently, that also my next door neighbor doesn't go anymore in the backyard, because by now she has been sending there so much dark energy that even she cannot stand it. You know, she has been sending to my courtyard, but because I didn't go to clean it up, now she cannot go there anymore as well, because she's been sending every day. Now it's been building up too much, so it's affecting even her. You know, so this is God's, for example, this is God's way of dealing, putting her in her place. He told me, don't go there anymore, leave the darkness to mount up, also because they created certain rituals which are a threat to you and to the dogs. So all of you stay in front yard, everybody in the front yard. So this was his strategy, and at some point God showed me, you see, now she's not going there anymore as well, because she cannot stand it anymore. So that is a weapon that we took away from her, basically. Well, these are to me, you know, I said before, I'm much more result oriented, and every time I keep saying, you know, are we done with this? Because I don't really enjoy this much, all of these things. And I'm like, okay, you took the instrument, but then I just be done. I want to be done with it, with her. Now, probably those that are passionate with spiritual fighting will enjoy as much as God going through all of this and learning about all of this. Today I shared with you a few more information which was guided to me by God. In the next videos I will share some more.